Welcome to IPMWORKS e-learning modules. My name is Ellie Dearlove from ADAS, and this video is part of Module 5, Invertebrate IPM. It will present Chapter 5.6, Synthetic Chemical Insecticide Resistance Management. The main aim of this chapter is to consider the role of chemical insecticides in IPM, the need to manage pest resistance to chemical insecticides, and the transition process away from insecticide reliance. Here, we are referring specifically to synthetic chemical insecticides of insect pests, and it's important to note that some of the points discussed may not apply to all invertebrates, for example molluscicides, or to weeds or pathogen pests. We will cover what are chemical insecticides and resistance management, and the implications for transition from insecticide reliance towards holistic IPM. As presented in Chapter 5.1, during the introduction to this module, an insecticide-reliant approach to pest management can appear highly effective in the short term, while the negative impacts may take time to arise and may be less direct. Let's reconsider the scenarios described in Chapter 1. In the first scenario, a pest that would have caused economic damage is targeted, an appropriate insecticide is selected and applied, and the control appears to be achieved. The effect is superficially very clear. No pests are seen in the healthy crop, whereas where the application was not made, pests and damage are observed. In the second scenario, a pest is targeted that would have not caused economic damage, but if we look at the outcomes, the result is still that there are no pests seen in the crop, whether the insecticide was applied or not. Given the low cost of application and the high cost of failing to manage pest outbreaks, it is understandable that an over-reliance on insecticides has built up over recent decades. However, now let us consider a third scenario, one in which pests have built up resistance to the modes of action of insecticides used. In this third scenario, in which the pest would cause economic damage, the application of the insecticide has limited or no impact because the pest carries resistance to the active ingredients in the insecticide application. In this case, the cost of both application and crop losses occurs. As covered in the first 5 chapters of this module, application of a range of IPM tactics would help to minimize the risk of pest infestations, irrespective of their resistance to insecticides. However, in some cases, there is a need to respond to serious infestations, and insecticides may be the only option remaining. It's essential that when this occurs, those products are used diligently to minimize risk to the user, end crop consumers, and to non-target species and the wider farmland environment. It's also important that they are used in a way that avoids selection pressure for pest resistance, as otherwise, not only will applications be ineffective, but the occurrence of resistant populations will increase. This is insecticide resistance management. There are 3 steps that lead to insect pests developing resistance to insecticide active ingredients. First, mutation is a natural part of evolution. At any one time, individuals with mutations that make them less susceptible or resistant to an insecticidal mode of action will be present within any population. Second, these resistant mutants initially make up a tiny fraction of the population. But third, as that insecticide mode of action continues to be used, those resistant mutants are selected because they will survive and reproduce whilst the sensitive ones die. Over time, the resistant individuals make up a bigger proportion of the population, so that the insecticide mode of action no longer works. Reducing the time over which pest populations are exposed to insecticides reduces the time over which selection takes place, and so reduces the likelihood of resistance emerging over a given time period. In practice, this means using a range of IPM tactics to avoid pest populations, minimizing the number of applications. By applying only when there is a clear risk of economic damage to the crop and targeting pest populations as directly as possible, it ensures that minimal selection pressure for the development of insecticide resistance. This is the most important pesticide resistance management approach. Where insecticides are being applied, there are three considerations to managing the development of insecticide resistance. These are all based on being part of a wider IPM strategy, using a range of tactics from across the IPM pyramid as discussed in previous chapters. The first is to always use the full label dose of an insecticide. Using a lower rate risks some pests that carry some resistance surviving. Secondly, ensure a range of products are used, either over time or in mixtures. Different insecticides use different modes of action, and it is the mode of action to which pests develop resistance. We can determine the mode of action by looking at the active ingredients within the products being applied. Please note that this guidance may be different than that for fungicide or herbicide resistance management. Reliance on a single mode of action will greatly increase the chances of resistant strains becoming widespread and unmanageable in crops. Use of a range of different modes of action is needed, but it's not always possible as the range of available products is reducing. Here are some tips. Check the label of different insecticides to ensure that they have different modes of action. Rotation of different modes of action is considered the most effective insecticide resistance management strategy where applications are unavoidable. Tank mixed or pre-formulated mixtures can also help reduce pest growth rates whilst using a diverse range of mode of actions. This is widely used in fungicide resistance management, but it may have unacceptable additional environmental burdens. When using mixtures, consider balancing the dose mixtures so that doses of components give the same effectiveness as a single product. Reliance on insecticides has built up over a long period, and transition towards holistic IPM will take some time. Insecticide resistance, combined with a reduction in the availability of different modes of action, is providing a clear justification for more rapid transition. However, many of the IPM tactics highlighted in this chapter cannot be effectively implemented in a single season. Some, such as promoting natural enemies across the agricultural landscape, may take several years to establish. Others may require the development of on-farm skills, purchasing or adaptation of equipment, or collaboration with specialists to get them working effectively. In the meantime, invertebrate pests still pose risks that must be managed. The default approach must be to only take action where action is required, i.e. the proposed art of doing nothing outlined in chapter 5.1. But this philosophy is at odds with many pest management programs in place across Europe. As part of a transition, therefore, effective insecticide resistance management is essential, alongside application of a holistic integrated pest management strategy. If you would like to learn more about the references and resources used to develop this chapter, please pause here.